The following program has been arranged by the Division of Game and Fish.
Here is the story of the Bluegrass State's great outdoors.
This is Kentucky Afield.
Kentucky Afield.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield.
Kentucky Afield.
More than 50 years. And still fit as a fiddle.
This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Roedy, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglan.
All good things must come to an end, like this year. 2017 has been a good one. Another is my position with this show. So in this final hour, that sounds dreary. We look back. I have a piece I forgot to air in 2005, a secret or two revealed, New Year's predictions, and retirement advice is always welcome. We go inside outdoors one more time. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear, flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. The natural tax shelter.
Land ice skip, that's normal. Evac signal, it's iron.
This is rocket science.
I'd like a Kentucky Nature Plate.
This is not. In fact, a couple turns of a screwdriver is about as complicated as it gets. Sure, the goal behind the Nature Plate involves ecology and the science of saving scenic places, but all you have to remember is to ask for it when you renew your regular license plate. When you do, you renew Kentucky, too. The Kentucky Nature Plate. Buy it today for Kentucky's tomorrow.
Life's busy. That's why Kentucky Fish and Wildlife created Fins to bring good fishing closer to home. If you live in Frankfort, Louisville, or Northern Kentucky, there's a lake close to you. This spring, be on the lookout for trout, catfish, and more being stocked. Fins, F-I-N-S. That stands for Fishing in Neighborhoods. So bring your neighbors for a fantastic time. Hook into more information at fw.ky.gov.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Charlie Baglan, and here we are. We made it. The very last show. I'm going to start with a poem. The end of the year, the end of a career. That's it. Today we stare 2018 in the face, and we wonder what the new year's going to hold. I bet for a bunch it's going to mean a day off. January 1 generally is a day off for most folks. I want to thank you for making Kentucky Afield Radio a part of your routine. But the appreciation goes far beyond that. It goes far beyond listening. And you listen because you like the idea of Kentucky's outdoor adventure. I'd like to say a big thanks to a few people. Dave Shuffett, for one. You might remember Dave back in the early 90s. He was the host of Kentucky Afield TV, and he brought me on way back in the day. I would also like to thank anyone. And I realize as I say this, you're probably now in your middle 20s, maybe even close to 30. Anyone who ever watched Kentucky Afield for Kids. Do you remember that show was on the KET Star Channel? I used to host that show. That's going back. I want to say a huge thank you to all the great radio stations from across this Commonwealth. You carried the show and you didn't have to. There is absolutely nothing better than hometown, community-focused radio. It's better than Sirius XM. It's better than listening to yourself sing. It's better than Pandora. If you want to know what's going on at home, tune in the local station. They'll tell you. And I'm so thrilled to have been a part of that for 37 years. I have to say thanks to a lot of individual sponsors for the show from city to city to city. It means so much that you have invested in this show each week. So here on the farewell show, first up, we are coming off one of the biggest times of the year, known for shopping. I just want to say that I know of no better way to know the options available to me as a consumer than advertising. I'll say it again. I know of no better way to know the options available to me as a consumer than through advertising. A lot of people simply hate advertising. They say it's deceptive. They say they're trying to sell me something I don't want. And I like advertising, especially when it targets me, and it's especially well done. I think probably the best advertising, and you'll agree with this, is simply word of mouth. Hey, what'd you think of the new restaurant? And they tell you. Now you're telling somebody else. It's kind of what radio is. I remember back in the 1980s, I lived in South Carolina. I was in radio there and advertising, and I was riding down the road listening to the radio. I heard this fellow who was promoting his home state. He was from Montana. He was going on and on about Montana and how wonderful it was, and he was bragging about it just like a UK fan or a U of L fan would be bragging about a big game. Its parks, its scenic beauty, its traditions, and he was speaking of it so vividly that I could see Montana on my radio. And it gave me an idea. I'd like to go home to Kentucky and do that very same thing. I get to share the stories of Kentucky beyond basketball and beyond bourbon and horses. And to my amazement, it happened. Through Kentucky Afield Radio and TV, I have been able to share with you great things that make Kentucky's outdoors outstanding. So, is that really advertising? Well, it's my kind of advertising. I'm not really trying to make cash registers ring, but rather ideas ring. Maybe that's safe boating, or the thrill of catching that first big fish. Trying to relate to you personal experience. I like the commercial for Discover. We treat you like you'd treat you. Hey, I like that. You got my attention. Let's go farther back. Wendy's, where's the beef? Remember that? How about the Santa Claus riding down the snowy hill on a Norelco shaver? I'd like to buy the world a Coke. You deserve a break today. Some commercials are simply part of our culture. And why is that? Because they tricked you? No. It's because they spoke to you in a language you understand about a subject you're interested in. Advertising that's effective doesn't show you a pretty picture. What it does is shows you a mirror. You can actually see yourself reflected in it. And the hardest part, I think, of any advertising, well, let me put it like this. Let's say Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, or Jimmy Fallon is talking to you about your product or your restaurant, and they say, hey, I really love this. And I'd love to talk about your store on my show. I only have 5 seconds. What do you want me to say? And when you can answer that, you're in business. My career hasn't really been about doing a 1-hour show or a 30-minute TV show or a 30-second commercial. What my Kentucky Afield career has been about is the 5 seconds. What will you remember from Kentucky Afield Radio? Could it be that each week we go inside outdoors? For the Kentucky Afield TV show, it's in the woods and on the water. For the Department of Fish and Wildlife itself, your partner in the great outdoors. Your life jacket's got your back. Kentucky Fishing. Be honest. It'll make a liar out of you. These are just a few of the ad slogans that I've had a hand in developing, and I had a lot of fun doing it. That's the thing, though. I did it for fun, but my first guest here on this farewell show actually does it for a living. Brian Blank, the Director of Fish and Wildlife Marketing. And, Brian, you have to have the best job in the world because you get to promote exactly what we love. Is there a secret to promoting the outdoors?
There's not really a secret, but it certainly helps when you're passionate about what you're trying to promote. I think it helps you connect with the people you're trying to reach. It's easier to engage, and it's easier to relate to what's important to them.
You had told me once on the phone, said, well, if you're going to sell something, it helps to have a lot of things to sell. And Kentucky has a lot of things to sell outdoor-wise. What are the ones that you find the most sellable?
Well, certainly whitetail deer. We're one of the top states to produce not just Boone and Crockett bucks, but the number of deer, the number of opportunities. With our season starting, first weekend in September with a bow and going through January, we're a very economical state to come and enjoy, chasing whitetail deer. So whitetail deer is really king for us.
What are some of your favorite campaigns that you've had so far in your tenure?
Well, certainly, the elk draw. The elk draw is very exciting because, being a person that's lived all my life east of the Mississippi River, whenever I thought of elk, I always had to go west or across the Mississippi River to see elk. And for us to have, 10,000 elk or more in this state that are wild, that you can go down, end of August, beginning of September, and see that beautiful scenery down there and hear an elk bugle. That campaign has been near and dear to my heart, and it's been really fun to watch that grow as our number of applications continue to increase and we continue to hit record numbers of applicants who are interested in getting an elk tag.
And your slogan for that is the hunt of a lifetime, right?
Yes.
It definitely is. I've seen people on Facebook say that. Definitely a hunt of a lifetime.
The other one I want to add that was really fun, and, sometimes we have an advantage when you know the personality that's behind the mic. Our dear friend Tony Wheatley, one of the funnest campaigns that you've built for us that we worked together on was Kentucky Fishing, It'll Make a Liar Out of You. And our dear friend Tony Wheatley has the perfect voice and, dare I say, the perfect personality to have pulled off selling that campaign. And we still laugh about that. And I still have people that come up to me and chuckle about that campaign we did.
Be honest, it'll make a liar out of you. That was fun to put together.
Well, and I would just want to say that we are so fortunate, and we've been so fortunate here, the 27 years that you've spent behind the mic building these campaigns and producing shows for us. I've worked with a number of people. You're familiar with my background and some of the places I've been fortunate to be in my career. But I've never worked with anyone that's as creative and as concise at getting a message across as you are. And that campaign was a perfect example of, we just came to you and said, hey, Charlie, here's what we want to do. Here's who we want to reach. Use your creativity. And that campaign, and a number of them that we've done, that's a prime example of your talents. And it's easy to make us look good at what we do when we have talented people like you putting these things together.
Well, I appreciate it. That means a lot. I've always enjoyed advertising, be able to come up with an easy, a fun way to make somebody remember something, and maybe down the road they'll use that. I remember once upon a time in your career you worked with, can I say this, Dick's Sporting Goods, and were part of the environment that created their slogan, every season starts at Dick's. That's genius. And you were part of that.
Yeah, and again, that was the valuable lesson that I learned about let creative people be creative. Because we had people that we worked with who helped come up with that slogan and that campaign, which has done really, really well for Dick's Sporting Goods. Again, if you have great products and you let creative people be creative and you have a way to deliver those products, it'll take care of itself. You're trying to connect with people's lifestyle. And so that's why you see us marketing and messaging through college basketball and college sports, because the same people that are as passionate about how well their basketball team performs tonight are also some of the same people that are just as passionate about making sure we have clean air and clean water.
They definitely are.
Yeah.
Ron Blank, it's been a pleasure to work with you these many years, and I hope we can keep in touch in the future.
We will. Thank you, Charlie.
It's the last hurrah. We'll be back with more. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio. This is the last show, and I got to tell you, I am willing to tell all. In fact, if you see me out someplace, just buy me a cheeseburger, and I will tell you a story or two about this television show that's right down the hall from my office that'll really make your hair curl. Like, shoot. Let me get this. Kentucky Afield Radio, who's this?
Hey, Charlie Baglan. This is Bill Cox.
Bill Cox. Holy cow, I haven't heard from you in I don't know how many years. I guess it's been back in the 80s. Bill, you were one of my heroes. Despite the fact it was under you that you said, here, go cut this commercial. And I said, well, somebody's got to write it first. And you said, you write it. I wasn't used to writing commercials, so this was a radio back in the day.
Yes, it was. I mean, with the stations, we had to do everything. We had to be a jack of all trades, and yeah, the disc jockeys had to write the commercials. We got better commercials that way, because when the salesman wrote the commercials, they were terrible.
Well, if I remember disc jockeys, when we got off the air, we wanted to go home. We didn't want to hang around, and so what we wrote very quickly, and it may have come across corny, but maybe you're saying that it worked?
It worked. It worked really well, and you know, as years went by, I'm sure we all improved and started doing creative things with commercials too. So,
what I like about you, Bill, is that and this wasn't until recent years, and you told me, you remember the commercials for, what was the Cavemen commercials for Geico?
Oh, yeah.
And what was the other one, the Camel, it's Hump Day? That's your cousin that does that advertising, right?
Well, he ran the company, and interestingly, this summer I got to meet the actual guy that comes up with all of those Geico commercials in Richmond. And just an average guy like us, you know, but he just has that mind that he can think this stuff up.
The one thing that made Bill Cox stand apart, and I don't know that I've heard anybody else do it, was the Kermit the Frog sidekick. Back in the 80s, it seemed like it was a great thing to have sidekicks.
Sure, and we, of course, didn't have a budget to hire another morning person, so you just had one guy sitting in there, and he had to come up with all these things. And so, I had to be Kermit the Frog and lots of other people. So.
I remember you would do Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I did Jimmy Carter, I did Ronald Reagan.
I would have to say that working with you at Kix FM in Marion, South Carolina, Florence area, almost to Myrtle Beach, those were some really great days. And
they really were.
That really was a special time in my life to work with you.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that, and congratulations on all your success in Kentucky as well. Yeah.
Well, Bill, I appreciate you calling them a million. It really means a lot. You're on the last program.
All righty.
All right.
All right, bye. Okay, bye.
Mr. Bill Cox. Nice to get a call from Lynchburg, Virginia, here on the last show. Now, speaking of sidekicks, I used to do a mean Yosemite Pete. He hated rabbits. Rabbits. Just like Yosemite Sam. Come here, you little weird goat. See? Thinking about wildlife even then. It's that wondrous time of the year when it is both duck season and rabbit season. I can say this. No matter who you are, what line of work you're in, or where you went to school, chances are you have crossed paths with somebody that has some real talent, that really went somewhere. Maybe you were in class with somebody who shot to the top. It happened to me while I was in South Carolina radio. Bill Meck, do you know Bill? He is the weatherman on WLEX-TV in Lexington. Bill and I worked together in Spartanburg at WSPA. And at 56 WIS Radio down in Columbia, South Carolina, I got to work with a couple guys, maybe three. One was the voice of the Motor Racing Network, Dave Rogers. Another sportscaster named Mick Mixon. Do you follow the NFL? Maybe you know Mick Mixon now as the voice of the NFL's Carolina Panthers in Charlotte. Kentucky is split among three baseball teams. And listening to baseball on the radio, and I remember doing this with my cousin David, we'd always go out and fish, whether a lake or a creek or a river, we'd take the radio and we'd listen to the Reds. Listening to baseball on the radio while fishing is what America is all about. Listeners in western Kentucky probably will follow the St. Louis Cardinals. In central Kentucky and up in northern Kentucky, of course, it's the Cincinnati Reds. And listeners in southern Kentucky may know the name of my next guest fairly well, the play-by-play radio voice of the Atlanta Braves, Mr. Jim Powell. But did you know that Jim grew up fishing and that he has Kentucky roots? Jimbo, welcome to Kentucky Afield Radio. It's been a day or two. I haven't talked to you, I don't think, since you joined the Braves.
I think that's correct. I think Miller Park was the last time.
What's the name of your new park? SunTrust?
SunTrust Park.
It's nice to have famous people on from Atlanta. You know, Ryan Seacrest came to mind, but the most important people, I think, in Atlanta is you. Don't you think?
No. No, I think you were right the first time with Ryan Seacrest.
Well, you're one of my heroes, Jim. You always have been, because I knew you when you were doing Columbia Mets baseball. Was that a single-A team? And you were doing it without the help of a color analyst. Weren't making a whole lot of money, but you said, I want to be a play-by-play announcer, and I'd love to go home and do it for the Braves. And, buddy, you did it.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. It's really definitely tried my best, at every turn, and I kept waiting for somebody to say, this broadcasting thing isn't working out for you, and time to go back to school and get a real job, and I'm still waiting for that day.
You've got a job that anybody would want. You've done well. I remember a fellow, when you and I used to do a show, I called it the Hey Jim Show, but it was called Sports Talk on 560 WVOC.
Yep.
And I remember you as a, maybe, I don't want to say bashful, but timid. But there was a time there was this Clemson fan, and he kept calling up his name Tommy the Tiger. And he kept saying,
I remember Tommy the Tiger,
making all these outlandish accusations about South Carolina football and how Clemson was great. And you said, no, this year they're not, and you put him in his place. And from that minute forward, I remember your confidence just rose 10 notches. And from that moment forward, it was just a different Jim Powell. I don't know if you remember that night or if I'm just dreaming this.
I wouldn't say that the public nature of the job perfectly suits my personality. I'd prefer to be just an average Joe. Most of the people that live around where I live, most of the people, I coach girls basketball and run feeder program and do a lot of stuff with my wife and go to church. And most people don't know who I am because I don't tell them. I want people to get to know me for who I am and not, because as soon as somebody finds out I'm working for the Braves, it's like they change. Again, a lot of people get in broadcasting because they want to be famous. I happen to be one of the people that got into broadcasting because I wanted to do baseball play-by-play. And the being known is just almost an unfortunate byproduct of that, is the way I kind of look at it. But I think, radio was a good fit there because it does give you the ability to blend in when you want to.
My wife Pam and I went to Grand Canyon. There's a place out there called Powell Point. And I said, it's Jim Powell Point. And we also have a Powell County here in Kentucky, and I'm a big fan of that county. And I think when I go to Powell County, I think of Jim Powell County.
Well, my family is originally from Richmond, Kentucky. That's where my mom and dad were from.
Did you spend much time here?
Yes, my grandmother lived there. My grandfather passed before I got to know him, but my grandmother lived in Richmond along with a great uncle, Uncle James. They lived in Richmond, so we would go back every summer. We would go back and visit my grandmother and my uncle, my great uncle, and I'd go up to Eastern Kentucky University and play tennis on their courts. And so I knew Richmond really well. I used to fish a lot as a kid and as a young man. And I've gotten away from that. Doing the summer job where you work every single day and they're all night games, getting up early to go fish on a nice summer day. It is something though, as we're about to be empty nesters, I've told my wife I'd love to find a lot that's on a lake that I can walk out my back door, walk out to my dock and put a line in and catch a bass. Mm-hmm. Hopefully in the next stage of my life, I can get back to doing some fishing.
What do you remember from WVOC and this fellow named Jack Murphy / Charlie Baglan? Was he worthwhile?
Jack Murphy was probably my favorite producer I ever had. You were so easy to work with. I'm sure the people of Kentucky understand that very well now that you're, a public guy there and have been doing outdoor stuff for such a long time. Everybody knows you, but they know you as Charlie Baglan. Back then you had your stage name, but you were fun to work with. Those were challenging days, 2.5-hour nightly talk show in Columbia, South Carolina. It's not a very big market. You don't get many phone calls. Sometimes you have to do a 2.5-hour soliloquy. And honestly, it taught me a lot of the skills that aid me in doing play-by-play in baseball, because there's so much downtime in baseball, and you can't just sit there and not say anything. So it's not a talk show, but some of the things that I've learned about filling the time and trying to find interesting topics to discuss when there is no action to describe, I trace right back to WBOC, Voice of Columbia.
Remember back in the day, it was a few years ago, I lived in a neighborhood, and I had a lot of neighborhood kids. I remember there was a time you used to give me some tickets to go see the game up if your team was going to be in Cincinnati, say the Brewers. And I said, well, I've got a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and some dads and I would like to bring them up, and we may get, a whole van load. And so you'd say, spot us like 10 tickets. Well, if we got up there and we only had 8 boys, we would have a couple extra tickets. So here's what we did. It was pretty cool. I think you'll be proud of me. We would go up to the line where people were standing in line to buy tickets to get in and find 2 of the prettiest girls. And we would give them to them, and then they would wind up sitting with the little boys. How about that?
That's very smart.
That's smart.
Yes.
I still have a photograph of you, me, and Bob Uecker that was taken in the press box at Old Milwaukee County Stadium, and it's on my desk at work.
Wow, you're making me feel really good, Charlie. I really appreciate all the nice things you're saying.
There was a fellow that I have on the show every now and then that looks a lot like you, and I'll pull that photograph out and say, you look like Jim Powell. Well, you're right, I kind of do.
That's great.
You have been with the Minnesota Twins, the Milwaukee Brewers, now the voice of your hometown Atlanta Braves, but now that you have been on Kentucky Afield Radio, you have finally arrived.
Well, I truly am honored to be on with you. I hadn't spoken with you in a bit, so I'm really glad we got a chance to catch up, Charlie. You're a great guy. You always have been. And, I used to enjoy running into you more over the years. I think when I was in the Midwest, it was a little easier. But I've always known that you're doing well in Kentucky. And my family roots are Kentucky, Richmond, Kentucky. So I love that state. It's a beautiful state, and I'm not surprised that you love it as much as I do.
Come back and see us sometime.
Okay, I will. Great catching up with you, my friend.
Jim Powell, the play-by-play radio voice of the Atlanta Braves. When Jim and I worked together, we did a lot of commercials for the South Carolina Gamecocks. That was a great time in life. It's the goodbye show, and just ahead it is most fitting that we go back to where it all began. The very first host of this radio show and a TV show by the same name. After the break, you're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Kentucky Afield Radio, Charlie Baglan in, the Goodbye Show. No fishing report this week. Our fisheries guys have the holiday weekend off. But if you would like to hear this show again, or email the link or share it on Facebook, it's easily found. You can find it on YouTube. Just go to Kentucky Afield Radio. It is the very last show on the long list. Just ahead, the man who had the very first show, 64 years ago.
That fish weighed 10 pounds.
10. That's the magic word.
Honey, I hadn't been there 10 minutes.
If he says 10, he's lying. And he says 10 a lot.
You gotta be happy you married me.
I can hear it coming.
Admit it. I'm your perfect 10.
Honey, why don't you take 10?
10-4.
Your Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, fishing's not about math. It's about fun.
And fudge it a little if you need to.
Kentucky Fishing. Be honest.
It'll make a liar out of you.
We are back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Thanks for joining me. This is Charlie Baglan in our second half hour of the Farewell Show. You hear the open of the show, more than 60 years, and still fit as a fiddle. When I assumed the show back in 1997, it was 5 minutes in length. That's it. Then we went to a live sports call-in type of show. It was 2 hours long. It was on Sunday night. Tim Farmer was the host. Then a year or two later, we dropped back again to the 1 hour show, and it was with Russ Kennedy. Previous to all of those names were Bruce Smith, Dick Farmer, Mike Smith, Hope Carrollton, and there was one even before Hope. As of next week, the first week of the new year, this show will again go on hiatus. It's a good show, and I feel, though, that one day it'll be back. Maybe on the air, maybe a podcast. But there was a time when a radio show on wildlife conservation was absolutely unheard of. And I want to say that Kentucky itself laid the groundwork for all of these outdoor shows that we see a lot of now. And we would be remiss to do a goodbye show without welcoming back the original host, Ron Roedy. Line 2, Ron, are you there?
Charlie, good morning. This is Ron Roedy.
Hey, I recognize that voice. Would recognize that voice anywhere. The original host of the show.
Thinking back that far, well, listen, I was really surprised and delighted for you, but really surprised to hear that you're thinking about repotting yourself. And I really want to congratulate you on the Kentucky Afield. I think you've done a remarkable job with this program, and I think it's been of significant importance to the conservation and wildlife movement in Kentucky. And way to go, Charlie. You've done a hell of a job with this.
Well, thank you, Ron. I like being able to say that Ron Roedy, the very first host of this program, in fact, you gave it its name, and radio preceded television. You stayed a friend of the show all these years. And golly, you have traveled the world in your job since you left the Kentucky Afield programs.
I'm very interested in, and always have been, and will continue to be interested in Kentucky. And Kentucky's home ground for me.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's been so remarkable about the show that has kept me interested in it is the changes the very positive changes that have taken place since I was there and doing the sort of thing that you're doing now. There was no deer herd in Kentucky. We weren't doing deer hunting because we didn't have a large enough deer herd. No turkey hunting because we didn't have a large enough population of wild turkey. There was no striped bass fishing because stripers didn't exist in the state at that time. There were only 3 big lakes. There was Kentucky, Cumberland, well, 4, I guess. There was Kentucky, Cumberland, Dale Hollow, and Harrington.
No.
So the changes have just been remarkable, and the fishing has been great. And I get back every now and then, as you know. I still have some family there. My brother lives there, and I try to get back, and I fish every chance I get. Try to get out on elkhorn with a fly rod and see if I can hang a smallmouth.
Where is home now for you, Ronnie?
We're in Pinehurst, North Carolina, which is called the golf capital of the world, at least by the people here. Very, very nice little community. It's only about 16,000, and it's very, 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 very pleasant.
You follow the show a little bit on the Internet and on Facebook. Has it lived up to this, not just from what I've done, but what Russ Kennedy has done and Tim Farmer and the other hosts that this show has had over the years? Do you think it's lived up to what you originally had set out for it and had envisioned back in the early 50s?
Oh, my God. It is so far past. It has so far exceeded anything I think either Harry or I thought about when these things were first going together, the radio show and then subsequently the television show. We had no idea that it would have this sort of longevity or this sort of impact that it's had both in the broadcasting industry as well as on the listening public and in support of the conservation movement in the state. No, absolutely, it would have exceeded beyond any dreams we might have had about what it might become. It's been just fantastic, which says a tremendous amount about the people who have been carrying through with the idea and with the program. I know that's truly amazing, but it says a lot about the interest that people have in Kentucky hunting and fishing, and the grand job that the producers and the on-air talent have done in presenting those shows in a way that holds their interest. You know, when we started on radio and then subsequently on television as well, when we started on radio, it was almost play-by-play. But we were, going into the field with a recorder and actually recording, talking with people, recording coon hunts and dove hunts and casting for bass on the Kentucky. It was a great job. I got to do all that. As I was, as they say, I was beginning as a senior at UK, so I was in I guess I may have been 20, maybe 21. But I got to go all around the state, hunting and fishing with the best hunters and fishermen in the state, associating with people that you just had to admire. It was just wonderful. Absolutely great.
How long was the show when you hosted it? Was it 20 minutes?
It was. Radio was 30 minutes. We did it weekly, 30 minutes. Did it live. We didn't have I didn't have the talent, and we didn't have the facilities to do any editing to it. So we came back with a tape from the field and made copies. We had a 54 station network then. We made copies, 54 copies of a tape each week, and shipped it out, and the radio stations got them, and they played them, and they shipped them back because...
I like the story I've heard you tell before, that sometimes you would ship a nice quality tape, but the radio stations just might, on occasion, send back a lesser quality tape. I don't know of a radio station anywhere, back when tape was the main medium, that would have ever done that. Do you?
No, I can't believe that story, Charlie. That's got to be, what do they call it now, fake news? That's got to be...
No, that has to be fake news.
That's got to be wrong.
I'll say, Ronnie, I sure appreciate you calling up. It means a lot, and I'm going to miss this program, and I sure am glad that you and I have become friends along the way over the last, 25, 30 years. I've always looked up to you, sir.
Charlie, thank you so much for saying that. It has been my pleasure and my honor to be associated with you and with the program. I wish you all the best in the days you've got coming. Take good care, my friend.
Nice to hear from Ron. 2018, the new year is coming. I will make a few predictions. This will be the year that some kid in NASP will shoot a perfect 300. I also predict that we will have a world record elk taken from eastern Kentucky. And I also predict that this year, Kentucky basketball and Rick Pitino will... shoot. Let me get this. Kentucky Afield Radio. Who's this?
Hey, Charles. It's Kathy Gilbert.
I remember that voice when you would call me at Wiki Radio up in Carrollton. Normally you would call me and say, hello, Charles, if I wasn't in trouble for something.
Well, not in trouble, but I hear a rumor that you might be looking towards retirement. Good luck and congrats, and glad that I was a part of your career.
You were the very best. You were the very, well, I say first, you didn't hire me, but you were like my first full-time general manager. A young lady named Janine Dean owned the radio station there in Carrollton. She hired me, and for whatever reason, turned it over to you shortly thereafter.
Janine was in a situation where she needed to have someone step up to the plate, and she asked me. I was glad to be there and to be a part of that whole time with Wiki.
My first day was February 20th of 1981. It was all live radio, and I bet if we looked at the calendar, it may have been a Sunday because all the new guys get to work Sunday morning shifts.
That's true, but it's interesting that you would even remember that date. But I'd say that you got to do Sunday mornings because nobody else wanted to do it, so the new guy came in, and there you go.
I was a new guy. It's trial by fire. I remember Mound Hill. You talk about we're doing an outdoor show now, but Mound Hill in Carrollton, actually Prestonville, Kentucky. It was beautiful. I did the morning show. I graduated from Sunday mornings and eventually did the morning show. And it was odd because we would sign on. Radio stations these days, unless you're a daytimer on an AM station, you don't sign the station on and off anymore. I mean, you're 24 hours. Even the smallest FM is going to be 24 hours more than likely. Aside from all the money you would make in small market radio back in 81, the real benefit of that job was being that morning show host, and you could see the sunrise over the Ohio River. Every once sometimes it would be foggy.
I just remember flying up and down Mound Hill Road.
I only had one wreck on that road in all my years working there. But that was the twistiest, turniest little road to get up there. There's no way to do it. You had to put on a really long song if you wanted to go down the hill to the Dairy Queen to get something to eat, and then get back up the top of the hill before the song ended.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you, why is it that I had to work 6 days a week and everybody like you in sales only had to work 5?
Just your luck, Charles.
Yeah. Your brother, let me mention Tommy Montgomery, if I can, for a moment. He was the one who taught me harmonica, and if you've listened to this Kentucky Afield Radio show, you'll hear blues harmonica as we go in and out of breaks. And that was me, but your brother taught me to play blues harmonica. And so, in a way, Tommy all lives on, even today in this program.
Well, thank you, Charles. That's very kind of you to say that. He went by Cowboy.
There, I remember some other people we worked with. Doc Dean was a fella who was magnificent. I don't know how in the world that little radio station landed such a world-class talent. He even worked at WLS in Chicago for a while.
He just kind of fell in our lap, really.
If memory serves, he may have had a mother living in southern Indiana.
You know what? That sounds right. That sounds right.
He came back to care for her, it seems. Names I remember from the early days include Tom Disbrow, Dan Reisner, a fellow named Ray Clem, Janet Day. She went as Marty.
Yep.
And then J.R. Wright, who was from somewhere in southern Indiana.
Yep.
Linda Eads, Alan Bradley, Gary Allen. There was a doctor. He was like in the school system, a Ph.D., but he did the Sunday afternoon show.
Dr. Paul Carey.
Paul Carey. Dave Taylor.
Mick Savage.
Right. I remember him. Mick Savage.
Pete and Janine, they had a world-class vision of what they wanted that radio station to be, and I think we achieved that, and went on to launch some successful careers, and including yours. And I'm really glad that we were able to work together, and
those were just the best days you could ever want in radio. Well, all these people were great, except me, and I don't know why in the world I was ever kept on the staff. Why did you fire me early on? I've listened to old tapes of me. Not that I'm anything today, but even then it was terrible.
No, I disagree with you, Charles. You had a great voice. You know, you just blended in with everything that we were doing, and it's just the time and place where we were.
I need to get, but it means the world to me that you've called. We could go down memory lane for just a few minutes. That was a great time in life.
Just, again, congratulations. It's hard to believe that I'm saying congratulations in your retirement.
37 years ago. And to think about it, you and I have not aged a day.
Well, thank you, Charles.
Some of my favorite memories of Kentucky Afield Radio are with our Fisheries District biologists. These are the voices you hear giving the fishing report every week at the bottom of the hour. But they don't just do the report. When they call in, they talk to me, and then I'll record the report. But before that, we'll get talking about everything under the sun. And one thing they're very good at is, well, two things. They make fishing fun wherever they are in their district of the state. And two, if you ever want to know how to tell a really good lie about how big the fish you caught was and make it sound believable, that is, if you want to stretch the truth, embellish the truth a little bit, these people know how to do it. They're in that business. And if you ever see one on the lake, they will tell you that there is no fish bigger than the one that got away, and that no fish grows faster than from the time that it jumps off your hook until the time that you're crying about it the next day to somebody. See, it's true. Kentucky fishing, it will make a liar out of you. Still to come, have you checked your mail? We'll be putting a stamp on conservation. This is a program that has been 12 years in the making, and I'll tell you why after the break. Up next, our final few. It's the Goodbye Show on Kentucky Afield Radio. We are back with our final few on Kentucky Afield Radio. It's Charlie Baglan, the farewell show. Every week on this show, we've gotten to go inside outdoors with all manner of people, from kids to everyday sportsmen, scientists, law enforcement, people who have been struck by tragedy. One man who influenced many in the conservation business was named Loren Schaaf. He knew wildlife. Now remember, this was back in 1992. The Department of Fish and Wildlife was in the midst, you probably remember this, they were restoring river otters to the streams of Kentucky. We worked out a deal with Louisiana. They have a bunch of river otters, and we have relatively few. And so they were brought here in cages. Now, if you've ever been around a bunch of river otters in cages, you'll know two things quickly. One, nothing stinks as bad, and nothing's nearly as noisy. Not even peregrine falcons. Their sex was to be determined. They were going to weigh them, give them some inoculations, measurements, all that sort of thing, before the next morning they just turned them loose into some selected streams around the state. Now, I was standing there, just Lauren Schaaf and me. And he paused a moment, and he turned, looked at me, and said, "Bagman, don't you wish you knew what they knew? Whatever that may be." That one question from Lauren Schaaf changed forever how I spoke about wildlife. They are not just some dumb animal out in the woods. They know more about some things than humans ever will. Lauren died 2 years later, but he still lives on in so many ways. Much about wildlife is a big unknown, and we rely on a great degree on just what people see. When folks call us or email us and say, "Hey, I saw a bear," or "I saw an eagle," there's a name for this. It's called citizen science. An example is mail carrier surveys. These are the rural route postal folks that do more than just deliver the mail. They know where wildlife is, oftentimes right down to the address. They ride the same routes every day, year after year, and over time this becomes trend data. My daddy was a mailman, so this story hits home. So I rode along with this kind letter carrier in Roedy, Kentucky, that's in Shelby County. This feature was expected to air in 2005. It didn't, but I kept the tape. And like any good letter, it's better to get it late than never.
I see turkey, deer, quail, rabbits, and raccoons. Plenty of raccoons, as a matter of fact. One of the things I enjoy really about it is I really enjoy seeing the turkey. I guess if a fella was a serious turkey hunter, he'd contact his rural mail carrier to find out where the turkeys are. We could be the best guides in the country because you can flat see them in the springtime right before the hunting season opens up.
One thing about mail carriers is if they don't have a hard enough time driving the vehicle from the passenger seat, is that they really enjoy their work. Fish and Wildlife can get reports from upwards of 750 carriers every year. Information particularly about quail and rabbits in the middle of summer. But oftentimes, folks back in Frankfort get bonus information on other species.
The other day I was talking, and when I came in, I told the postmaster, I said, "Man, I had a great day today." And he said, What did you do? And I said, "I saw 3 turkey hens together, and they had 19 little ones with them right up here. They were going back and forth trying to get everybody together, and they crossed the road right here, went in that tobacco patch."
So hats off to whomever delivers your mail, your daily newspaper, your pizza. Mail carriers, along with joggers and cyclists and anybody who travels a given route with regularity, is a watchdog of sorts. They see things, they notice things. Vehicles where they shouldn't be, or anything else that is a tad askew from the norm. Together, it's a neighborhood watch of sorts, somewhere out in the county, and it can give a sense that all is right in the world that day. So how did you get your start in whatever you're doing now for a living? Who prompted you to take that first step, fill out that application, take a course in college? For me, it was a high school friend. His name was Gary. And oh yes, I wanted to be a rock star, a race car driver. I had dreams. Big dreams. This is starting to sound like a dream sequence. But indulge me for a second. He doesn't know that I'm calling.
Senor.
Calling to say it's all your fault.
Do what now?
I'm calling to say that it's all your fault.
Are we on the air, or are we just bantering here?
Yes, we are on the air.
We are on the air.
And it is all your fault. 37 years ago, you could have wanted to have been a fireman, and I would have followed your footsteps. You could have been a doctor, a lawyer, CPA, but no, you wanted to go into radio, so I followed you there.
It's a good thing that it wasn't the other way around, because had you gone into a modeling career and I would have followed you, I would have fallen flat on my face.
I would have lasted a day. So you're saying you wouldn't even have gotten that far?
No, I wouldn't have gotten that far.
But I don't know if it would have been a worthwhile career if you hadn't been there or somewhere in the background or at the same station, because those were generally the best days of my life.
Well, we had a good time when we first started out.
How long did you stay in the business?
I was in until the mid-'90s, I believe. I worked at several different stations, and I was fortunate enough to work a year in Louisville.
Yeah, I remember when you got that job, and you're very secretive about even applying for it. This was, we're on in Louisville on AM 970, but this was on Country 11 it was called. It was a country station back in the middle 80s.
Right, that's what I was playing.
You didn't waste any time saying, well, Charles Baglan, I beat you to the big time.
Well, you beat me into the business. I just happened to beat you to the major leagues.
That's right. I beat you by 6 months, and you beat me in the major leagues by many years.
We did make it eventually, and, we had a good run at it and had a good time doing it.
Sir, I have about 2 minutes left, but you and your love for Gary Burbank, Johnny Carson, and Ed McMahon were an influence on me. So thanks for your friendship along the way.
Good luck to you in your retirement, Charles. Been great watching you over the years, listening to you over the years, working with you.
We'll eat wings.
We'll go definitely go get some wings, and but just good luck to you and enjoy your retirement. And I hope many years for you. Honestly, I would talk longer, but I have a date to celebrate with a couple of White Castles, and I would invite you, but I'll just have to leave it at thanks. Thank you too. It's just now dawning on me that everybody I've talked to this past hour, from various stages along the way in radio, I've always said the same thing. Those were the very best days in life. And again, it's appropriate now. There have been far too many show topics and too many people to make this show possible, and I am not worthy. But I have a stiff neck, and I'm not worthy of that either. But I'm delighted to have had this outdoor Kentucky bond with you. I appreciate you listening. Thanks for welcoming me into your home, your car, your breakfast table. And it's been good to hear from folks that have called in and emailed in to say good luck, good riddance, so long. It has been a great ride. And just like paddling down a river, I can't wait to see what's around the bend. We're out of time. This is Charlie Baglan reminding you the very best in local radio is right here. And the great outdoors begin at your doorstep. It's been my privilege to have been part of both. Happy New Year from Kentucky Afield Radio.